fate has brought us here. And this little kernel of a dream started down the road, actually down Michigan Avenue at Amel's Restaurant, some 8 years ago now? No, okay, 6. All right, 6.
6 in November, okay.
It's been an epic saga.
Yes,
and we sat down, and I had seen an article in the New York Times actually about distilling and craft micro distilling or artisan distilling. And at that point in time, there were less than 100 small distilleries across the country. And I knew Jeremy from our kids' preschool and knew he would be the right partner for me on this journey. So I bought him a Michigan Brewing Brown. I'm not sure if I even bought it for you.
Went Dutch.
Yeah, so that night we talked about this idea of building both a brewery and distillery here in Lansing. And Lansing is, for a long time, has been a center of industry, of manufacturing, of creativity, and we thought, why don't we harness that and harness the community resources that we have and build that here? And after that point, we did our research, we took classes, contacted folks like those at LEAP, also the Small Business and Technology Development Center, and really just kept putting one foot in front of the other. And we really would not be here without great partners like the Allen Neighborhood Center and Joe Nelson, and the folks who bring us creative ideas and great things like fresh hops from the garden house and facets like that we'll depend on throughout, I think, our life. Would you like to add anything about our beginning?
The one thing that I would add is I think that, I was dead set on not starting Sleepwalker as a small, super small business. And, when you're trying to start a business like Matt and I are working on with Sleepwalker, you have these sort of grandiose ideas about what's going to happen, and then you sort of knock them down a couple of notches to become more real with what's really happening. And then ultimately, when you're sort of really desperate and you really want to get open, you bump into Joan and she opens her arms and along with the board here and everyone and says, what if you just came and sort of got your start here? I mean, look around, this place is perfect. And in the end, it really is perfect. And it's I think I would throw in just, be flexible in how things are going to start, because we started really up here. And I don't mean to show like Height being the best place, but things became much more real for us after a few years of really digging into the business plan. So yeah, this place is perfect though.
Yeah, and one really important element of who we are, and please, if anyone has questions, we'll talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of our evolution, and we can also talk about brewing. I think probably more appropriate is how our business has evolved and what has brought us here and where we plan to go. But our vision, which is the one thing I think that we've stuck to, so we've changed what we thought our first venue would look like, and we've changed some other ideas about production, but in the end, we came back to this idea that we can have a business that's owned by the community. And at this point, we have over 30 investors. We have 32 investors, and we're over halfway to our goal of $125,000. So that also has kept us going. And all along, as I was telling the folks from LEAP in my interview earlier, we're giving away beer. And the nature of alcohol is that it's highly regulated, and you just can't sell beer without getting a license. And to get a license, you need to have a location. And so that's where the magic of this place happens. And when the first time we had the Liquor Control Commission in here, the very first few minutes, the inspector looked around and said, I don't know how this is going to work. We have an area that, as you can see, Alfco's using right now, and we are just adjacent to it with our fermenters full of beer, and they wondered how that would work. And so once we convinced them that all the alcohol would be next door and we would have a tight lid on that, they were really receptive. And I think they were excited about having something like what we're doing happen here. And our investors were very excited. We said, listen, this is a detour. We're going to open up this little to-go stand. It's going to be temporary. We're going to put a little bit of capital into doing this. And all of them have been excited. And I think they see that it's going to help us bring our beer to the public. People can see what our beer is like, and they can get on board if they like. And also we can supply beer not just to the public coming in, but kegs to different events, to some local bars and pubs that are interested in doing that. And that for us will be a great promotional asset to have, as well as bringing on some capital. So here we are. I would say, go ahead.
Oh, well, did anyone want to go into the process of brewing at all, or is everyone kind of pretty well versed in that, or what were some of the other things we wanted
I was
to
going to
cover?
talk about the evolution of resources, and then talk about that. If you want to do that?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. And so as we had this idea, we sat down, we talked about it a lot, and then we realized we have this idea and we want to bring it to fruition. So how do we do that? So we found, located adjacent to Lansing Community College, is a small business and technology development center. They're hooked up with other satellite offices across the state. One great thing that they did for us was gave us demographic data on Lansing, and we looked at different parts of Lansing. We looked at Reotown, Old Town, and the East Side, and they gave us a breakdown of age range, how much money is spent on alcohol, and a number of other things. And that led us to believe and really affirm that this was a great place to start, because the East Side has the youngest demographic and also the highest rate of expenditure on things like entertainment and alcohol. So that was a no-brainer to come here. And so, and I'll let Jeremy talk a little bit more about the brewing and getting a handle on that, and the nuts and bolts. I know for Maker Week, that's also a big part of bringing an idea to fruition as a business, is the nuts and bolts of actually doing it. But with the business part, Jeremy had some savvy with being an independent musician for years and years. And then I, as a history teacher, had none, but I'm a pretty decent researcher. So it's something that we looked into and we dug into and just leaned on folks around town and also other breweries across the state. So the folks at the Hideout and at Black Rocks have been great to us, helping us out. And the brewing community, in terms of an industry or an area of business, is just great because most folks are really willing to help other brewers out, and they just want them to be successful. And as many of you know, brewing is a huge industry in Michigan, and so brewers take that seriously, and they want to maintain that profile and the levels of attention and production that we already have. It's a great part of our culture. Brewing?
Sure, brewing.
And distilling too, maybe.
Making. Yeah, we can, yeah, sure, okay. I'll talk about as much of it as I can. So as far as the brewing goes, has anyone in here ever brewed beer before? Awesome. Okay, all grain extract? Partial? Nice. So when you make beer, basically, you're gonna crack or crush a bunch of grain. You're gonna throw that grain in a big vessel. So the long and short of it is kind of you crush a bunch of grain, you steep that grain in hot water, just like tea, right? And then you sort of take that the grain off the water, and then which isn't water anymore. It's sort of like super sweet brown tea water. And then you throw that in a kettle. You boil that for about an hour, and then you add hops, and then you chill it super fast when you're done. And then you've pitched yeast into that wort. It's called wort at that point. And we don't pitch the yeast in the kitchen. We promised Michigan Liquor Control that we would do that in our private little room over there. And that's really how we were able to use this community kitchen that many people rent. So after the beer ferments for a good 5 to 9 days or so, depending upon what you're making, then you'll sort of transfer the beer to a secondary vessel for secondary fermentation and conditioning. And then from there, you'll keg it or bottle it or whatever you want to do. So that's pretty much the long and short of beer, right? So that is how we make our beer here. And we'll use 2 vessels for that steeping, that mashing process, and then 1 big vessel for boiling. And if you ever get a chance to bug us in a couple of months, you should come down because it's a lot of fun. And as far as the distilling aspect, which we won't be doing here at Allen Marketplace, it's similar in a way. So when you make, we'll be making a whiskey. So instead of barley and wheat we can maybe a little wheat, but we'll see. You're sort of using grains, but we're going to be using tons of corn instead. That will be the biggest part of our grain bill. Corn, some barley, and maybe some other private things proprietary private recipe things. So you do the same thing. You sort of steep these grains, you pull off this massive amount of sugar water. Instead of boiling it at that point, we put yeast into that water, that sort of sugar water right away. We then let it ferment for, again, probably 5 to 9 days or so. And then what you do with that wash at that point, it's not, you could take a bunch of beer and throw it into a still, if you've ever seen a still, and the vapors that come off will there'll be alcohol, but it might not be the kind of flavor you wish for. So when you're making a whiskey, you use tons of corn, you make kind of like a corn beer, and then you take that corn liquid that is fermented and has alcohol in it, throw it into the still, and then you'll pull the vapors off on the other end. So it's what kind of like Matt and I, 6 years ago when we started talking about this, we were like, we kind of need the same equipment for both processes. So we were thinking maybe we could do both. And in the end, we probably would be using a lot of the equipment at the bigger shop to do both, but we won't be doing any whiskey here in case anyone was curious. So it's just, it was really hard enough just to get the license to do this. You have a question? How are we going to age? So that's a great question. So once we open our real shop, like this is our temporary shop, and we're grateful to be here beyond measure, grateful. But once we have our shop, we will have a small, probably a 600-liter still. We're only going to be making whiskey. We're going to keep our focus real tight on one product, which we believe in. And as far as the hardwoods that we have available here in Michigan, I don't know if we'll have a cooper that will use Michigan hardwoods. That would be great. But we think we'll be able to use some Michigan hardwood inserts and stuff. As far as aging that white whiskey, because all whiskey when it comes off the still is completely crystal clear. So it takes that really cool brown color, reddish color. It takes that on after maybe about a week, say 3 to 7 days. But it doesn't taste good yet. It takes, which you would probably know, I can tell you're into this. So, whiskey takes years to actually reach a maturation point that you can really just kind of be like, wow. If you give whiskey 20 months, which we've done these experiments ourselves, and it's funny to taste it every few months along the way. We did a whiskey that we let go to about 36 months, and then we stopped on Michigan hardwoods on 3 different species, and absolutely outrageously delicious, even in a simulation inside like a big mason jar. It was delicious. So it's not rocket science, If you want to keep things safe, you want to keep things clean, but it's super fun to watch that happen. So aging for us, there's a good chance that we may have to do some contracting in the beginning because distilling it's quite expensive, especially what we're going to be doing, aging in barrels. We're going to need a giant bonded warehouse to be able to handle those barrels.
And it's incestuous.
Right. If you have any questions, also, we're looking at a straight whiskey. So we're pretty much looking at a 2-year straight whiskey following the TTB guidelines on the grain bill. So it's true American whiskey. Bourbon, which we love, I don't think we're going to mess with that, at least not now.
And there's a whole holistic piece to where we're fathers and we have full-time jobs, and we're honest with each other and said we want to do this, but we also don't want to go crazy doing it. And we want to maintain a lifestyle that is reasonable. And so that's also a part of our evolution. And we had some artificial timelines, like we need to be here by this point in time. And talking with other people who have done long projects, like Dave Muley on the East Side in particular, he said you just got to keep working and you'll get there. And that was really, for me to hear that from him, who I think he's done a lot of great things in this side of town, that meant a lot, and it changed my thinking. And I think it also allowed us to think more out of the box and to be in a place like this. Right here.
Why did you choose an age for your versus something like a dinner or like vodka?
You could do vodka. There's a lot of.
There's a point that I didn't get to.
Sure, you can. And there's also a lot of different vodkas that are on the market. And if you want to specialize or have something special, so within whiskeys right now, something similar to what happened to craft beer is happening. So there's lots of differentiation. People are into single barrels. People are into different blends. So with that happening, and also with some of the ideas that we have with a whiskey that will reflect Michigan, we feel like there's more of a market for that. And there also really is an international market for whiskey right now that there isn't for vodka. So a whiskey that reflects the the terroir, the area that it comes from, is really desirable. And vodka really doesn't have that, because you can make vodka from anything. And exactly. And so even with, and I use the word incestuous, even within, so craft distilling, even within whiskey, there's a lot of production from really big companies in Indiana and Kentucky. Right, so there are five or six large companies, and then they make 30 or more different labels. So you think, oh, there's all these different bourbons out there, when really they come from just a few facilities. So people are really hungry for differentiation, and the market's opening up, and we think that, so thinking it from a business side, that was really important to us as well, to have that.
I wanted to say one thing I forgot to mention earlier to you. Since we're talking about like makers, weekend, whatever, I think it's important also, I didn't get to finish my thought, I forgot, but is that, so we'll have this 600 liter still on site, which is pretty small in a way. However, we're going to be able to make a lot of white whiskey on site. We will probably age our first barrel or two from what we make on site at Sleepwalker. Beyond that, we may do some contracting here in town so that we can make, have tons and tons of our specific recipe made just the way we want it, thrown into barrels that we choose, and then stored in a bonded facility just to get us going. When it comes down to the still that's going to be on site beyond those first couple of barrels, we're just going to be making tons and tons of white whiskey. We've been experimenting for the last 5.5 years with even white whiskey and how we can infuse it. And how, shockingly delicious it can be even next to a vodka infused very similarly with different types of fruits, teas, coffee, chocolate. There's tons of really different things that you can do with white whiskey. It's really just as versatile as vodka, and it tends to have, it's a little more aromatic. It's really just delicious. Straight white whiskey is also really delicious too. So I think that people in Lansing, there's going to be huge education push on our end to show everyone what they can do with white whiskey. And we're pretty much certain that we probably won't be able to keep enough white whiskey on the shelves either. Even though my heart lies inside that cask, I love aged whiskeys. I think that the white stuff is going to be a blast and a lot of fun for Lansing and beyond. Well, probably. Yeah, it's tricky. I don't know if you've done any distilling or if you know anyone who has, but if you try to sort of proof down from say 160 down to say 80, it's funny how quickly things can cloud up if you don't have the right filters or the right methods on how to get down to 80. I just went out to Sanctuary Spirits last week and talked to Carl and, his business partner, Jamie? I forget his name. Great guy. But anyways, I was looking at them, shocked at their beautiful bottles of spirits, vodka and stuff, gin, crystal clear. And I'm thinking, this is what we need in Lansing. I've been to some other distilleries that their processes and ways of making that stuff hadn't really evolved. They hadn't tapped into the technology that you need to make a world-class spirit. Well, it's great to see out at Carl's place, at Sanctuary Spirits, I should say, because I know that they're co-partners, but really delicious spirits and done really, really well. So that's great. And it was, so if you get a chance, you should visit there too. But
So we have a little bit of time, perhaps. And we all could also, if you guys want to check out the space, we can do that as well, which we probably would do maybe off camera. But did you have any questions in particular, ma'am, about beer or anything else? All right, I just wanted to see if you had any in particular. So if, this spot here is, again, temporary, but we feel like it's also going to be our foundation.
it's a huge foundation.
And I think that, again, reflects having this, having resources to build off of, and I think that's something that the folks around Lansing do well. And we simply want to enhance that and grow on it and move on and add to it as we go. So hopefully this first step is the first step of a long process and long history here in the city.